is coming from the inbound travel. Once na hindi natin naprotektahan po yan, ay magkakaroon po tayo ng tinatawag na exponential increase ng mga cases.
That was Vaccine Chief Carlito Galvez making the case for heightened restrictions against the entry of foreigners and returning Filipinos.
And with more cases of the more contagious variants of COVID-19, government is also placing a cap on the number of inbound passengers allowed at the country's main gateway. Good evening, I'm Gretchen Ho.
And I am Robbie Alampay. You're watching The Big Story. We begin tonight with the country once again closing its borders to foreign tourists and even some returning Filipinos. This is to curb the continuously soaring number of new COVID-19 cases and the spread of new variants.
The National Task Force is also limiting the number of incoming passengers as hotels and other quarantine facilities may no longer be able to accommodate them. Marian Enriquez has the big story.
Back in February, the country eased its restrictions on the entry of foreigners, allowing diplomats and other Philippine passport holders to come to the Philippines. But with COVID-19 cases soaring once again and more reported cases of new and contagious variants, the government is tightening its borders again. Beginning March 20 until April 19, foreigners and even returning Filipinos who are not OFWs will be barred from entering the country. But 9C visa holders, medical repatriates, and their escorts rescued distressed overseas Filipinos, and those with emergency and humanitarian cases are exempted pending National Task Force approval.
Ang nakikita po natin talaga nagiging cause na nakita natin yung mga variants is coming from the inbound travel. Once na hindi natin naprotektahan po yan, ay magkakaroon po tayo ng tinatawag na exponential increase ng mga cases.
The IATF is also limiting the number of inbound passengers at the Ninoy Aquino International Airport to only 1,500 from 3,000 previously.
Nakita po natin yung mga hotels. Wala na po papupuntahan yung ating mga inbound travelers.
This is more of a demand for quarantine facilities.
Because of the new policy, Koji Espina, Filipino resident in Japan, will not be able to attend the baptism and birthday of his child.
Dati pagkakasabi ni President Duterte, basta Pilipino pwedeng pumasok ng bansa. Biglang ganun ang hirap.
Transportation Undersecretary Artemio Tuazon explains why OFWs will still be allowed entry.
Pag natapos na yung mga kontrata nila or kailangan na nilang umuwi, ay madalas naiipit sila overseas.
Authorities say airlines that will carry more travelers than their allocation will be slapped with a fine. IATF assures that they will raise the quota of passengers if the spread of cases, particularly in Metro Manila, has slowed down. For News 5, Marian Enriquez, we are One News.
A number of medical facilities in Metro Manila remain at critical levels. Tonight's big number, 19. This is the number of COVID-19 hospitals in the National Capital Region that are more than 85% occupied and they're nearing full capacity. The majority of hospitals, meanwhile, are still on the safe level, according to the DOH, with 96 facilities posting less than 60% occupancy rates. At the national level, 78 out of more than 1,000 COVID-19 hospitals are in critical level. More than 900 facilities, meanwhile, are still considered in the safe level. Now, what should all of these numbers mean? Do they spark confidence that hospital occupancy in NCR remains manageable? To help contextualize the big numbers, we have One News Chief Correspondent Ed Lingao joining us live via StreamYard. Now, Ed, we've been discussing this since yesterday at the Chiefs. I mean, we're reporting hospital capacity on the national level, at the level of NCR, at the level of individual hospitals. What does it all mean, and what's the difference?
Yeah, well, Robbie, the DOH numbers do seem reassuring. That's 30 to 40% availability of COVID beds in NCR. So on paper, it does seem reassuring. But if you contextualize the numbers, they don't sound as reassuring anymore. For example, if you take note, the hospitals that have confirmed that their COVID wards are full, for example, Makati Medical Center, St. Luke's, Cardinal Santos, Medical City, and so on down the line. If you notice, The full hospitals are the major hospitals that have the resources, the equipment, and the personnel that they need. And actually, that's the reason why they are full, is precisely because of that. They are the preferred hospitals, especially by those who can afford hospitalization. So those that still have available COVID beds, unfortunately, are now the smaller ones, the smaller hospitals. And these are the hospitals that may not have as much resources and personnel to bring to bear against COVID-19 cases. So in some, yes, you do have so many health facilities in Metro Manila with varying degrees of size and equipage. And unfortunately, as it may sound, not all hospital beds are created equal.
Now, let me see kung kaya kong pasimplihin yon. You're saying, kaya natin kayang pababain yung occupancy rate on a NCR level is because linalakihan natin yung denominator dahil kinukumpuni natin yung numbers ng smaller hospitals.
Yeah. Well, kasama naman talaga sa equation niya. You're looking at 159 health facilities. That's what they call them in Metro Manila. So they vary in size from the smallest up to the biggest. For example, Makati Med and St. Luke's. So yun ang range mo eh. And to be fair din to DOH, that exactly is the range. These are available beds. Available beds, it doesn't necessarily mean that they have equal quality of healthcare. So magkaiba yung dalawa.
Okay. Maraming salamat, Ed Lingao, and we'll continue that conversation on the Chiefs immediately after the big story. There is no reason to suspend vaccination. This is the DOH declaration following the reported death of a vaccinated healthcare worker. The DOH and the Food and Drug Administration say the assessment shows that the healthcare worker succumbed to COVID-19, not to the vaccine. Health officials are further clarifying that vaccines do not cause COVID-19. They added, even with the vaccine's minimum health standards, such as wearing a face mask, frequent hand washing and physical distancing should be observed. The case is now considered closed, and officials are calling on the public to respect the privacy of the deceased.
These are the other big stories tonight. The health department says new COVID-19 cases the past days have matched the peak seen in July of last year. Active cases are also at its highest since September. Today marks the start of an order prohibiting minors from leaving their homes. But authorities are already laying down exemptions, even allowing minors to travel domestically by air. And 6 women of Asian descent were among those killed in a shooting rampage in Atlanta targeting spas. These big stories right after the break.
Good evening, I'm Robbie Alampay. You're still watching The Big Story. The order banning minors from going outdoors takes effect today, but the NTF is making a number of exemptions. What are those? JC Cosico tells us.
Barangay Santo Domingo in Quezon City has an extra set of eyes. CCTV cameras are positioned in streets to monitor compliance to COVID-19 protocols. It's captured violators, minors outside homes without face masks and shields. Minors have been ordered to stay at home for the next 2 weeks.
Sa mga magulang po ng mga bata na nasa labas ng bahay, papasukin niyo po ang inyong mga anak sa loob ng bahay. Paulit-ulit po kami nagpapaalala, mga magulang. Huwag niyo pong pabayaan o hayaan ang inyong pong mga anak ay nasa labas ng bahay.
Parents and their children immediately ran inside their houses, but some were nabbed and brought to the barangay hall.
Hindi kasi pwede yung ganyan ngayon.
Guardians will be slapped with fines from 300 pesos up to 1,000 pesos, depending on the number of offenses.
Hindi naman kami nagkulang na wag silang lumabas. Makulit talaga, hindi sumusunod.
Another parent is dismayed that they now have to cancel their Batangas Holy Week trip.
Sa bahay na lang po, dasal-dasal na lang, ganyan. Video call na lang po sa mga kamag-anak namin sa probinsya.
But there might still be a way. The MMDA says those 15 and above may travel with their families in a private vehicle.
Yung pong 15, 16, and 17, pinapayagan po iyon, no? Dahil mas paano, kamukha na sinabi ko po, safety naman siguro ng magulang, tsaka point-to-point naman ang mangyayari.
As for air travel, Philippine Airlines, via a clarification from the National Task Force, said minors are still allowed in domestic air travel in preparation for the Holy Week break. IATF co-chair Carlo Nograles said it's best for tourists planning to go to the provinces to coordinate their trips with LGUs.
Ang una niya munang tanungin is kung yung LG of destination ba ay tumatanggap rin ng minors.
Nograles called on the Tourism Department to issue new guidelines, especially on travel bubbles where tourists are allowed. For News 5, JC Cosico, We Are One News.
Health experts are seeing a repeat of peak cases from last year as new cases tally over 4,000 again today. But the rise in cases may not be entirely due to the new variants. Camille Samonte has that report.
For the sixth straight day, new COVID-19 cases in the country breached the 4,000 level. This range of new daily cases matches the peak seen in July 2020, according to the Health Department. This DOH chart would show that cases during the first week of March this year would match the level of cases in August of last year. But delays in reporting in 2020 should be factored in, says the DOH.
This is epic curve, meaning po kung kailan po nagkasakit. No? So medyo mas delayed siya. Pwede ngayon lang po kasi na-report pero ang pagkakasakit niya ay days or weeks ago. It's now at the same peak. Sabihin kung gaano karami yung nagiging pinakamataas na dami ng pagkakasakit last July, now it's at the same peak.
Active cases in the country are also now at 61,000, a level last seen September last year. Dr. Altea de Guzman of DOH Epidemiology Bureau says majority of the infections are happening at home and workplaces. She noted that for this month, cases are now 2.5 times higher compared to January. They are looking at the new and more contagious variants as a contributing factor. But even before these were detected, cases are already on the rise.
Meron ka mang isa o dalawang variant of concern, pataas talaga tayo lahat no? At kung tutuusin, yung pataas na dami ng kaso natin, bago pa man tayo nakakita ng mga variants of concern, nakita na natin siya.
The UP Octa research says the reproduction number in Metro Manila from March 10 to 16 significantly increased to 1.96. This means a single COVID-19 patient may infect 2 people.
The other factors were that there's the complacency of people. We do admit that there's some pandemic fatigue, and there's some people believing that the vaccines are here, so everything's going to be okay. And I think that also increased mobility. People started going out once the vaccine was here.
Experts believe there are many ways to balance economic reopening and public health.
It's very important that you take care of yourself. Talagang you have to equip yourself, try to boost up your immune system. So sabi nila, huwag ka magpuyat, exercise, sleep is very important.
Dr. Jonas Del Rosario says LGUs should continue implementing localized lockdowns and stringent contact tracing in their localities. For News 5, Camille Samonte, We Are One News.
Officials are proposing a new vaccination plan for the current supply of doses in the country. The country has around 1.1 million doses on hand. In the current setup, 550,000 medical frontliners will be vaccinated, first with an initial dose, followed by a second shot weeks after. But Health Secretary Francisco Duque and Vaccine Chief Carlito Galvez are proposing changes. Why not vaccinate 1.1 million instead with the first dose? This would allow more frontliners to be vaccinated, but this would mean waiting for more supplies for a second shot. Several doctors are supporting the idea, including PGH spokesman Jonas Del Rosario. Experts are considering the short shelf life of vaccines. Studies also show that a vaccine gets more effective with a wider spacing between jabs. The recommended gap is at 3 months. That is beyond the expiration date of AstraZeneca shots, which is set by the end of May. But experts note no mixing of vaccines.
Time for an extra's look at some of the day's big stories. The government eyes to inoculate 1.7 million health workers by mid-April, says vaccine czar Carlito Galvez. Galvez notes that vaccination for senior citizens may also begin in the same month. Next priority sectors will follow in May. 1 million doses of Sinovac vaccines are expected to arrive by March 28. The United Kingdom reports 2 cases of the P3 variant first detected in the Philippines. UK government says one is linked with international travel, while the other is currently under investigation. P3 is more transmissible compared to the original strain, and to date, there are 98 P3 cases in the country. And the state-run PTV apologizes for a tweet last night on its social media page with the hashtag Duterte Palpak. In a statement, PTV says the hashtag supposedly resulted from predictive systems in the text entry phase. The personnel behind the now-deleted tweet will face disciplinary actions. Critics use Duterte Palpak to mark a year of lockdown. Time for another quick break. When we return. Today marks the 500th year since Spanish explorer landed on Philippine shores. But why is there confusion as to when they really arrived? And is this another case of hate crimes against Asians in America? 6 women of Asian descent were killed in a series of shootings in Atlanta. The details after the break.
Good evening, you're still watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay. Some 500 years ago, Ferdinand Magellan started the first navigation in the history of the circumnavigation in the history of the world. But when did Magellan actually arrive in the Philippine Islands? And is Spain's arrival actually worth celebrating for Filipinos? Let's find out with mobile journalist Stanley Cajete, who's giving us a front seat to the story.
For 2 generations of Filipinos, this was the song that helped define their sense of early Philippine history.
On March 16, 1521, when Philippines was discovered by Magellan.
March 16, 1521, Magellan supposedly discovered what would later be called the Philippine Islands. This was chronicled by Antonio Pigafetta and immortalized by 70s pop singer Yoyoy Villame. But 500 years later, the exact date had to be corrected. Magellan really landed in Homonon Island, Samar on March 17, 1521. Pigafetta failed to adjust his dates after crossing the international date line. This is now the date commemorated by the island and the National Quincentennial Commission. Another point in dispute, that Magellan discovered the Philippines. Historians say that Magellan did not come as a conqueror of savages. In fact, Magellan and his men look more like refugees who met an advanced but foreign culture.
The Filipinos and the Europeans discovered each other. Akala natin dumating yung mga Espanyol, all-powerful. Apparently, tayo pala yung nagbigay sa kanila ng comfort.
Magellan's arrival would eventually lead to colonization of what he then called Islas de San Lazaro. The Portuguese explorer set sail under the Spanish flag on a mission to find a new passage through the west. And as part of the deal, he would carve a new path for conquistadors and evangelists. But that was still far in the future.
Yes, colonialism was bad, but let us not also forget that today, we have a strong relationship with Spain. We have to continue the cultural exchange as our ancestors did.
And in the end, it was Magellan's expedition that would circumnavigate the world to show people that one does not fall off the end of the earth. At least in that respect, Filipinos carved their name in history by making sure that Magellan's expedition would survive and make it around the world.
Kung hindi pinakain ng mga Pilipino yung mga Espanyol dito, patay na sila, it would have delayed the scientific discovery of our world. Kung ano ba talaga yung mundo natin.
Stanley Gahete, We Are One News.
Sorry, parang tayo yung...
Let's take a look at the biggest stories on print and online. From the Philippine Star, the Health Department and Food and Drug Administration are reminding the public that ivermectin is not a treatment for COVID-19. The agency stressed that the intake of ivermectin can be highly toxic. The prescription drug is used for the treatment of external parasites like head lice. It is also used as a veterinary treatment. Business World reports a formal groundbreaking ceremony for the Bulacan Airport has finally been set within the second quarter of the year. It was initially slated on December 2019 but was postponed due to contract issues. San Miguel Corporation's 740 billion peso project is expected to be completed in 4 to 6 years. And this from News 5, 2 were injured after an SUV rammed into a bank along EDSA Congressional Avenue in Quezon City this morning. Owner Esther Peralta claims the incident was due to mechanical malfunction. The QC Police District says, however, that they are not ruling out human error in their investigation.
And here are the other big stories from around the world. 6 women of Asian descent are among 8 people shot dead in a string of attacks on day spas in the Atlanta area in the United States. Authorities say a man suspected of carrying out all of the shootings was arrested hours later in southern Georgia. The police have yet to offer a possible motive behind the killings, but civil rights groups suggest it could be related to rising hate crimes in the country against Asian Americans. New York's police department has deployed additional patrols in Asian communities in the area as a precaution. And in a landmark ruling, a Japanese court says not allowing same-sex couples to get married is unconstitutional. This would set a precedent in the only G7 nation that has yet to fully recognize same-sex partnership. The ruling by a district court is a major symbolic victory in Japan, where the constitution still defines marriage as being based on the mutual consent of both sexes.
For the big story in sports, the PBA isn't ruling out the possibility of delaying the opening of season 46 on April 11. The league is just waiting for the approval from the IATF to hold non-bubble games next month. But Commissioner Willie Marshall says they are ready to adjust their timetable if needed. Marshall tells the Philippine Star that the teams need 10 to 12 days to hold 5-on-5 scrimmages before the start of the conference. Currently, teams are doing non-contact conditioning sessions by batches of 5 to get in shape prior to the games. The Premier Volleyball League is looking to hold its inaugural rookie draft by 2022. League President Ricky Palou made the announcement on Tuesday as 12 teams get ready to play in PVL's first season as a professional league in Laguna this May. The league is also considering imposing a salary cap system among teams to ensure competitiveness among squads. In separate news, F2 Logistics welcomes a familiar face, with Kali Mao suiting up for action. The outside hitter announced the news on Twitter, saying she'll be back in the country by the end of the month from Hawaii.
OPM icon Ellie Buendia is calling for smart voting in 2022 in his new song, Metro. The former Eraserheads frontman posed this question. He takes a swipe at unnamed incompetent politicians and their supporters. He also tackles the West Philippine Sea dispute and the government's pandemic response. In the coda, Ellie urges Filipinos to make a decisive choice. We Need a Leader PH's YouTube page launched the video. The campaign was launched by ousted House Speaker and former PDP Laban Secretary Pantaleon Alvarez. For News 5, MJ Marfori, we are One News.
After winning Song of the Year at the recent Grammys, Phil-Am singer Her embraced her roots and gave fellow Pinoys a creative shout-out. Her, or Gabriela Sarmiento Wilson, bested the likes of Taylor Swift and Beyonce with her Black Lives Matter anthem, I Can't Breathe. In celebration, Wilson reposted her TikTok video on Twitter with the caption, "Shout out to my Filipinos, hashtag Pinoy Pride." She made an impression of Tita Joan, her proud aunt.
Oh my God, I am so proud of you. You have Grammys. Wow. Diamond? Is that diamond?
Pinay na Pinay yung accent.
Pinay na
no?
Pinay. In time for, 500 years of Christianity, of East meeting West in our islands. Teka muna, may tanong ako. I'm sure you know Eli Buendia.
Of course, Ellie Buendia, Eraserheads.
Yoyoy Villame, kilala mo pa ba?
Hindi.
Seriously?
Hindi.
Hindi na?
Hindi talaga.
Ako. Ed Lingaw!
Sino yun?
Yoyoy Villame, history teacher nila Ed Lingaw, PE teacher pa.
Ah.
Tuwing umaga ang exercise kay Yoyoy Villame.
Kumakanta rin ba yun?
Yeah, but look, sa quincentenary ng Pilipinas, you have to know who Yoyoy Villame is.
I'll Google it later.
Malaking issue to.
All right, so let's wrap up today's big story so I can do that. Catch us again tomorrow at 8 p.m. on Signal Channels 8 and 250.
Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, visit our webpage, onenews.ph. Mask on.
Wash hands.
And stay safe, Philippines. I'm Robbie Alampay.
I'm Gretchen Ho, and we are One News. Have a good evening.